and they've been very courteous in following our sessions with great attention. I must say the sessions have been important and very interesting indeed. Typically, there are positive statements made in the closing session of events of this kind. And all the more so, we are very, very satisfied and pleased with what we've heard, with what we've read, and what we've seen. This has been a very intense day, and it isn't going to end now. As you know, G7 meetings are prepared at political, diplomatic, and technical levels. Therefore, each and every G7 event is a sort of peak moment of the work that is carried out. Now, there are undeniable outcomes following all this work. This is the first time that we're speaking of digital government at a G7 ministerial. We've never discussed that subject, digital government. And this is an important outcome, and it is the result of the effort made by Italy. Italy wishes to share multiple experiences that we are acquiring in our country. And we know that perhaps to a lesser extent they are being experienced in other G7 member countries. Therefore, we decided to initiate intense cooperation vis-à-vis anything that has to do with digitization. And in some cases, we've even initiated stable technical governance efforts. In other words, our staff members will be cooperating with regard to some technical matters. They will look into them very intensely upon request of the political level of our policymakers. So this has been a very successful event, and it's been widely discussed. Clearly, we want to disseminate this idea of interoperability because it is key. And it is a mainstream topic, nationally speaking. And Prime Minister Meloni has already tabled this at the G7 meeting. And what we want to do is to have intense interoperability because we want to have data exchange, information exchange among G7 countries and even other countries, not only G7. This is another important aim that we have. And I think that Italy has something to teach here. Of course, so we can look into some of the details of this. Now, with regard to data, we are pleased because even in the plenary session, there were some contributions that focused our attention on the importance of data. Data represent a significant element for the present and for the future. It will be the same. And you are also teaching us about this because it is a way of replacing even atomic deterrence. And hopefully nobody will be resorting to this kind of potential that comes with the atom bomb. In any case, we know that data is already acquiring a key role in the diplomatic relations between countries, in particular to stabilize the rate of democracy in the world. And we did focus on the subject during our meetings. Now, everybody seems to be quite interested in understanding what kind of experience we've acquired. We've initiated a sort of federation of data. Now, as you know, when it comes to the health sector, we are trying to create a central repository for the health data ecosystem. Now, clearly, the data will stay with the regions, with the regional authorities, because in our constitution, it establishes that the regions have authority when it comes to health. So it is useful to try to understand the usefulness and the effectiveness of this data federation, in fact. So this is as I said, we're dealing with data federation, with security, with strategy as well, and we're trying to do this in a very comprehensive way. We've come a long way, and we are working on this with other G7 countries. There's another novel element with regard to this toolkit, and perhaps it's been misleading for some because it's not a technical instrument, even though it's called a toolkit. It is a container, a box, as it were. And it is a way of providing us some guidelines, some ideas on how to go forward. And the G7 members will put into that toolkit some instructions with regard to AI development, for example. And there will also be some moral suasion exercises. As you know, there are countries that have sanctions within their regulatory framework when it comes to AI management, whereas other countries have a freer system. So this is what we're thinking, and this is what the Prime Minister is focusing on. This is why G7 meetings are so important, because we have to swiftly identify a common denominator, a value common denominator, in order to see how we want to apply AI applications. Now, somebody asked me about the toolkit. As I said, it's not an instrument; it's a container. It is a working instrument. Okay, we can call it that if you like. So, in the bilateral sessions, we spoke also about digital identity. We have a very strong need in all countries to ensure the truthfulness and the accuracy of digital data. This is important even when it comes to accessing public administration services. We're working on the wallet, and I think that in Europe we'll be perhaps the first to get there. Now, access to public administration services in all our countries that are engaged is a very serious matter. And this is why everyone is so interested in understanding more about this. So we'll have an exchange of best practices with regard to how to identify a digital identity. In Italy, there will be one way to do this. And by 2026, in fact, we will have this unique digital identity. Now, something about AI. You know that the Italian system is very consistent, very coherent with regard to the AI Act. And we are proud to have actively and constructively participated in the drafting of that law. This has required a huge diplomatic effort, but this is the first regulation anywhere in the world on this. And we've discussed, especially in the bilateral meetings, what our short-term intentions are. In fact, we are going to be one of the very first countries to have a law which is entirely dedicated to AI. And therefore, when you put a cross-cutting issue, a delicate, a strategic issue, and a very topical one at that, in a law, then obviously that's an important exercise. And the Meloni government is doing just that at the moment. I think that in the next 15 days, the law will be ready, the bill will be ready. And the member countries have obviously asked to be kept informed as to the status of this law. And as I said, we will be providing as much information as we can. There is one final point. Some have reiterated this, and we agree, of course, so, on the subject of businesses and on the idea of safeguarding data. We think that we should seize an opportunity in the first 10 days of April for an informal telecoms council to organize this meeting, not only to be able to talk about the feasibility of the white paper that was recently issued by Commissioner Breton, but also to lay the groundwork for a Digital Network Act of the future, i.e., technological services in Europe for the future. And it is clear that AI is going to be linked to all of this. And we have to do this very swiftly. So let me go back to an idea that we discussed in some of our bilateral meetings with European member states, and that is the creation of a cloud. A cloud, which will be important at European level, of course, this cloud should make it possible for businesses and others to seek certification of data and the truthfulness of data. This is very important because you know that the Gaia X European cloud has slowed down substantially. Today, it is an instrument which is used simply to identify standards, and this is a problem. And in the business world, they're asking for this kind of guarantee, this certification of data accuracy. With regard to digitization and what actions can be taken in order to enable this, and on the subject of digital ID and AI, I can tell you that Italy is equipped enough to be able to contribute constructively to all this, proactively, and thanks to the role taken by the Prime Minister, I think our contribution will be a defining one, considering how much attention is being attached to this by our partners as well. So I've tried to provide you with a summary of all the matters that we've discussed. If you have questions now. And this is not the outcome of only one day's work, obviously. We will make sure you receive a joint declaration. This was drafted together with businesses and universities and research centers. It's a final statement on digitization and AI that was created, and it will be issued in just a few moments. They're finalizing this document as we speak. And this is an additional point that I wanted to make, because there is a strong desire to work together, to work in cooperation, because we want to improve national, international conditions for Italian, European, and global citizens. Do we have questions?
Se ci aiuta gentilmente a capire bene la posizione.
Can you help us have a better understanding of the government's position? You mentioned something about the e-wallet earlier, the EU wallet. And can you help us to understand what this goal actually means and entails? I believe it's a European goal as well as an Italian one. My second question is, have you also considered the risks attached to AI when it comes to employment? Because, of course, there will be job losses because of AI. Okay, very briefly, I can say something about the wallet. As I mentioned, we agree entirely with what is being done at European level. We have goals that are, of course, part of the National Resilience and Recovery Plan, and we have set a timeline, and we're already experimenting with this at the moment. And in the course of this year, of 2024, we'll be able to state that the first Italian wallet is now official and can be used. So it will contain a driving license, for example, or maybe your national disability card and documents of this kind. So this is our first goal. And from late 24 through the implementation of the National Recovery Plan, of course, we will be working on other items, and we are trying also to enhance our national identity mechanism, which is the SPID mechanism, and we're working, therefore, on creating wallets based on European indications, and in doing so, we can also make private wallets sustainably and feasible. So what we want is a unique digital identity, as we have with the electronic identity card, because we said this today, this is the safest European document. It's a level 3 document, so we all agree that the public and the private sectors have to work together on this. What about risks of losing jobs? Well, we certainly discussed this, and we don't think we should fear this overall destruction of jobs. That's not what's going to happen. Some jobs might disappear, but others will be created, will appear. And therefore, we have to be optimistic. We have to think positive, and we have to leverage what comes with history, our history, because we've gone through industrial revolutions in the past. And remember the Ludists who were taking apart the looms because they thought that with automation there would be a decline in occupation and employment, but that didn't happen at the time. And then more recently, this has been happening with internet. In the early 90s, it seemed that internet was going to devastate all jobs everywhere in the world, but that's not what happened. So this is what they think will happen with AI now. Okay. I suppose this is a more challenging technology than the ones of the past, and this is why all national and international bodies are trying to tackle this. Let me with determination. Let me add something to this. There are some institutes and research centers who have told us that in Europe in the coming years there will be millions of jobs that didn't used to exist. In other words, in the industry, they're going to have millions of jobs to fill, of positions to fill. So we're going to have to deal with this problem. This has to come from industrial policies of the individual countries and the European policy. So we need to be consistent here in the way we deal with this. It'll be useful because we might have a decline in employment, but there will be an increase in automation, for example. So, I mean, that's something that we have to consider. And there is no technology other than AI that have improved conditions at work, for example, for all workers. So where there is more automation, there will be other reskilling processes that will be offered, and we're already considering those. So those workers will be employed in other positions. Well, for growth, we need resources. We need to develop knowledge, and we need infrastructures. So what kind of agreement is there with regard to the GDP figures for Italy, for example? Well, we haven't been speaking of resources, but there is an important point that I'd like to make. I think you know that Italy has raised the funds that are needed to support innovative SMEs and startups that will work on AI. And with the Cassa Depositi and Prestiti, we're also working on this. And together with Italy, there are other countries as well. And of course, they are drafting a very serious financial plan vis-a-vis AI. So it is clear that each country will do its share of the work. But this is not what we discussed today. We didn't go into the economics of this kind of support. Good afternoon. Luca Zorloni from Wired. You mentioned the bill that will be submitted or should be ready in about 15 days' time. What will the role of defense and security be within this bill? With regard to the golden power, will there be any linkages between that and AI? And will this somehow have an impact on acquisition of startups or Italian companies? Now, you also mentioned Gaia X. So I'm wondering here, what is happening now? The project wasn't very successful for a number of reasons. And what is Italy going to do? Because I think that with Confindustria, they had committed to this in order to support it. But will you be withdrawing? Will you be pulling back? Will you be pushing for the European cloud or network? So what will Italy's strategy be here? Okay, let's go. Let's take the last question first. On Gaia X, clearly, Europe is considering this, as you know very well. And as I mentioned earlier, we will be discussing this again. And I think it's quite clear that the expectations with regard to the cloud from a few years ago have not been successful at all. So what we want to do is to ask Europe to invest resources in order to create a cloud which will ensure a sort of certification of the reliability of data. Now, on the question of security, let me just remind you that the government is not only working on a government bill on AI. It's already voted and approved, and it is currently examining at the Parliament, at the Chamber of Deputies, a cybersecurity bill. They're examining it already at the Chamber of Deputies. So that will include a number of issues, as you yourself pointed out. They will include security and even the golden power. Now, in the coming days, we will be fine-tuning this formulation, this language, and we will have to consider, of course, the legal implications and see what kind of elements can be included in the AI bill. Now, there is a will to do this, and I think this is an important point. However, as you know quite well, we also have to take into account the AI Act because this has already defined a number of matters. So with our bill, we simply have to allow our industrial system, in any case the Italian system, to be aligned with the AI Act.
Poi saluto anche.
I would also like to ask Minister Urso to join me when he wishes. He will be perhaps answering other kinds of questions on different subjects. From Class NBC, you've spoken of industrial policy, especially in the past few days, but this morning, and I'm referring here to Germany and England and the UK, because in their government they've started this whole process before, earlier. So are there more? Is there a greater incentive for our country now to do this as well? And you mentioned fund management. There is a fund of 150 million CDPs, and how they're going to be spent. Can you say something about that? How these funds will be spent? Well, how they will be spent? Well, first of all, we need the bill, and we need to understand how we can then implement it. We might even be using predictive AI to see how it will be how it will be received. We have to consider all sorts of implications, even training, for example. And for the industrial policy, okay, that is a problem for Italy. We perhaps have been lagging behind, not only with AI, but telecommunications as well. I would say, however, that there are countries that have a more consolidated industrial policy, and many of these countries are wondering how they can update and revise this policy, considering the new challenges that are coming in. I mean, even just a couple of years ago, or even last year, the situation was different. So can you wonder what will happen in the future once we have implemented the AI Act and our bill as well? Now, on industrial policy, with Minister Urso and with other ministers, with other competent ministers, I mean, when you talk about industrial policy, we have to focus on training and on economic matters. So we're working together collectively in order to bring together the different research centers and universities and the SMEs. We have to bring them together because they will be essential in providing AI services to the government, to the public administration. I remember that my department is implementing, and the results are quite outstanding and successful. We are implementing the PNR policies on the digitization of the government, and this requires a huge effort, but I must say that it seems to be quite successful, even with the central as well as local administrations, public administrations. So we're trying to understand how AI can do even more. In other words, how it can be useful for us in digitizing the government. But at different levels of government. But we're making huge strides forward compared to what was done a few years ago. Thank you very much.
Adolfo. È vero che era dedicata all'AI e alla...
This conference was dedicated to AI and digitization, but we'll have Minister Urso join the conference now. Were you about to ask a question, or were you just doing your workout? May I have a comment on Trento and on the region of Trentino? Talking about AI in our, I mean, we are like a small lab, and we would like to be the protagonists in this field. I know that yesterday we visited FDK, which is a center where there's no doubt they are addressing all AI-related issues. So we were just wondering what can Trento do with regards to AI. G7. Today, the city was empty, and there were many people from, I mean, law enforcement people. Just so we're not used to having these meetings, ministers who meet, but there's. I mean, but there's no way to get in touch with these people. I mean, they're like the area is cordoned off, and you're out of touch with the local citizens. Well, you see, this is a very important event, and of course, there are some security measures that have to be followed. There's no doubt about this. So as far as we're concerned, on Tuesday, we have submitted our strategy on AI that was done in a wonderful location in Rome. Over 250 startups were invited, startups dealing in AI, the state enterprises, state-owned enterprises, private enterprises, and anyone who would like to join that conference could join the conference. So I think this is a very important. So of course there will be many other meetings in the future, and we still have other meetings at regional and local level. When it comes to this specific area, Trento and Trentino, Kessler Foundation is a point of excellence. There's no doubt about this. I don't need to repeat this. Kessler Foundation is doing some extraordinary work, not only in terms of AI, but also it is also doing this in cooperation with my department because we fund most of the initiatives of the Kessler Foundation. So we have a two-way cooperation, which is great because it's very good for us because it would give us insight as to how best to allocate resources and they can better understand what is the direction given by the decision maker. So this is a kind of cooperation we have with the Kessler Foundation and I myself with the department and with the Councillor Angelo Borrelli, who is in charge of this department. We want to further enhance this cooperation for the reasons I just said, because having a public-private partnership is of the essence here when it comes to AI. Now, Kessler is public, but of course they do outreach to the private sector. Now, so Kessler Foundation works very well when it comes to objectives. And let me say this. Now, I must say very honestly, Trentino is the most highly cabled area in Italy. Well, just think about the problems I had in terms of connectivity nationwide and what we're presently doing with my government trying to improve the connectivity of the network. FTTH has a very high rate of penetration in this area. This means that we're certainly not laid back in this region, and of course we want to set this region as an example for the other regions in Italy.
Le rispondo subito, no.
Apologies, there was no question. I mean, the question is not to the mic, so.
Io mi occupo di rete, non mi
Well, the only thing I'm dealing with is network, so I don't know whether Minister also wants to add anything to this. By the way, stock exchange has not closed yet, so I'm not going to make any comment. But there's certainly one certain delay with regards to the so-called white areas, as well as the gray areas. May I say also that gray areas fall within the list of European objectives. So, of course, there's a delay from previous governments, and somehow we need to catch up through a series of initiatives, amongst which also some legislative initiative. I don't know whether Minister also would like to add something to this. Yes, but let me first come to the concluding remarks of today's meeting, especially for our foreign guests. Also, just to update them on what we decided with the other G7 countries, and then of course we also have Italy-related questions. But as you know, this G7 Ministerial meeting has started in Verona. And there was the following premise. The meeting, for the first time, which has a very wide participation, has also included B7 stakeholders. International stakeholders have participated in this forum, and so they met with the B7 representatives. So the first session was a dialogue with the protagonists of this sector, that is the businesses. So the first part was the day dedicated to industries and technologies in Verona, and the second part is, which was very well chaired by my colleague Butti, who has the specific competencies in Palazzo Chigi on AI and digitization. But the final document will be a joint final document, a G7 joint final document on industry, technologies, and the digital sector. So I would like also to make reference to the contents of this document for the Italian presidency, because this is just the kickoff date. We have a long process. We will have another major step, of course, in June, when we will submit our work to the heads of state, and that will be, of course, a very important date. But this will go throughout the whole year. We will have a second hybrid ministerial meeting in October, and then the final report with regards to Butti's competencies and the other part concerning the Ministry for Enterprises and Made in Italy. This final report will be handed over to the next G7 presidency, in this case Minister Champagne, whom I think you have already met these 2 days. He's really an amazing guy. So this is the pathway. In this final document, we have decided to reactivate, together jointly with our partners, the G7 of industries. And this didn't happen for 7 years, because this really means that we really want to stress the importance of today, more than ever, the importance of using the latest technologies, including AI, to increase the competitiveness of our countries in face of the huge Asian challenge. So this is why the industry ministerial meeting has been reinstated, because and this has to be used hand in hand together with the opportunities coming along with the new AI technologies. Let me also add that not only have we also asked for the participation of other international organizations, but also other countries which may give their contribution to this process. Ukraine with the Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of the Economy, because I mean, in terms of value chains and of Europe, we mustn't forget that, for instance, energy along this value chains, gas supply has been disrupted, and then another model with regards to connectivity, and this is another model that we have addressed. So mobility in terms of planes, transport, but mobility also in terms of communication, fiber optics. This is a country which is investing heavily in also in AI. And then, of course, we needed to have a perspective from Asian country. So when it comes to R&D, one of the leading countries, which is South Korea. So we asked them to give their views, and we had a specific ad hoc session dedicated to their views on this. And we have three areas. I have two bilateral meetings, so apologies, I have to leave. Let me just thank you all. Minister also will stay, but I would like to thank you especially for what you will do in the future. We badly need to improve the communication channel when it comes to this revolution. We can do this only through your assistance and your cooperation. So I have two bilateral meetings, apologies. So somebody said, why do we have all these bilateral meetings? But you see, when it comes to summits and meetings, international meetings, bilateral meetings are of the essence, because sometimes we had to leave the room because we had bilateral meetings. I'm not talking about bipolar something. When we're talking about bilateral meetings. Thank you and apologies. So in this joint final document, three topics have been addressed. The first is emerging technologies, and top priority is AI, but not only AI, because just as equally important is the guidelines that we are giving on quantistic mechanics, and especially for SMEs, as we just said. And then the second theme is on communication networks, connectivity. They have to be resilient. They need to be safe and secure for the communication of information. And this applies both to connectivity and network data and information. I think you all know things that have happened in recent months because if in the Arctic area and in the Persian Gulf, these networks have been threatened. And this may also happen in the future. So connectivity, resilience, and security of network is of the essence for our countries and also for Europe as a whole. And value chains and supply chains, because from ever since pandemics hit us hard, I mean, the supply chain are of the essence. And then the digital sector with special attention on Africa. How can we involve the global south, above all through AI, and generally speaking, through general technologies, new technologies. So there's been a paradigm shift here, because we are all aware, and you are aware, that the global geopolitical order has changed, and this affects the economic side. So this paradigm shift can be clearly shown because we have clearly addressed these issues in G7. We are shifting away from competition between our countries to an all-round cooperation. Say, for instance, because we want to guarantee the supply chain. We want to guarantee the supply of chips. So if you don't have a chip, when we didn't have a chip during the pandemics, there was one car that couldn't be completed or manufactured. But likewise, this applies to green and digital technologies, ensuring this, the supply chain from A to Z. So this is what has allowed us then to finally draft this document. And we have identified 3 areas when it comes to these topics, because of course then you have to read through the lines of this document, especially the first version, because it shows a pathway, and this is clearly shown in the document. And so we will have a working group set up, ad hoc working group, which will be dedicated to the activity all the way down to the month of October, when we have the handover to the new Canadian presidency. So emerging technologies of the industry and AI and quantum sector, together with the other G7 countries and together with the European Commission, because the Vice President has been with us. She's been with us for 2 days longer, and she is also responsible for industry and competition. So artificial intelligence in the productive sectors, and it magnifies this sector. Therefore, it has to be developed in a trustworthy and secure way, and fully fully respecting human rights. And of course, this is a very specific issue. I mean, Alessio was referring to it as anthropogenic approach, where the person is center stage in this approach. Micro and SMEs can fully benefit from this process. This has been the recurring theme throughout these 2 days' work. We need to develop new skills and new competencies, and so this is tied with employment. So either we need to develop skills of the labor market, 5.0 transition. The 5.0 transition plan is taking this into account. We're not living in another planet. We're living on this other, and we're aiming at another planet through the space. So this new model that we came up with in the bill of the National Resilience and Recovery Plan, with 13 billion euros, this 5.0 transition plan sets forth the following. Any company, Italian business, that wants to use these resources for digitization, also through artificial intelligence, like with the previous 4.0 plan, and for green transition, of course, with the new technologies, they can allow 10% of the total amount of resources to the training of their workforce for the new technologies. So this is the first response to the need, how to switch, how to make it so that 5.0 plan will be very important, not only for the enterprises, but also for the workforce. 10% of resources, 13 billion euros in 2 years in terms of tax credits, can be used for the skills of new technologies, so they can train their workforce for these new technologies. And then enhancing cooperation within G7 with developing countries to encourage the full adoption of these technologies in their countries. So one specific chapter is dedicated to the quantum sector. And this is a new challenge, because together and after AI, because we all are taking AI into account, of course, now, but we're still not really focused on quantum technology, which is just around the corner. And I think it's just as equally important because of the potential that it offers. And we need to delve into this new field and new technology, because given these requirements and given these equally shared opinions and ideas, you will see that in this final document, the Italian presidency is now committed to attain the objectives which are included in this first area, which I just mentioned, to come up for the October ministerial meeting a report of industrial strategies for the G7 countries of AI for micro and SMEs. So, in other words, our report will be dedicated to how to best use these technologies so that micro and SMEs can benefit right now from the digital technologies. Otherwise, they would be just cast out from the market. And so coming back to what we're presently doing, as you all know, we have set up in Turin this foundation on applied technologies, in other words, AI, and its knock-on effects in the automotive sector, aerospace, and circular economy. So the foundation on what we refer to as enabling technologies, so how to fund the research through the various multinationals in applied research, research applied to the enterprises. So Italian Foundation on AI in Turin has this mission. And we will come up with a report in October. So in the upcoming months, we will identify the best practices in each G7 country, but not only within the G7 countries, which have proven to be successful in the technological transfer to SMEs, so that we can find a common denominator here. And this will be included in the October report.
And we will also be making recommendations as to the strategies that will be needed to support micro businesses and SMEs when it comes to adopting AI technologies. In addition, we will try to raise awareness among stakeholders. We've already discuss this with them, but we'll be talking more and more over the coming months. We have an innovative formula here in Italy that was immediately taken up by those who will follow us, because Canada has already said that this innovative formula in engaging with stakeholders that we introduced with our first ministerial will be the method they will follow in their presidency next year. With regard to quantum technologies, we have to cooperate to develop quantum industries so that citizens and businesses can benefit from those. Now, Japan launched the Hiroshima AI process, and we've taken the baton over from them. So just as they've done in their presidency, during ours, we want to focus on a process relating to quantum mechanics, because this is another important frontier for us. Now, the second area, which is in the document, refers to secure and resilient networks, and therefore supply chains and production enabling factors. So what have we envisaged here? First of all, we want to ensure resilient and reliable supply chains, and thus we've decided to create a working group which will deal with common roles on the supply chain security. In this connection, the Italian presidency will soon submit, so in the coming weeks, it will submit a concrete proposal to our partners, and this will take us all the way through to the ministerial in October. We've also decided to establish an ad hoc working group on chips, because this way we can share analyses, information, and strategies, ranging from research all the way to sustainable production. So that means how we can make chips production sustainable in our countries. Of course, you will realize how important this is when it comes to the strategic autonomy of Europe, and also other G7 countries throughout the dual transition, green and digital transitions. And we have to be better coordinated in times of crisis. In other words, we've decided to shoulder this responsibility. In other words, with this working group that will be set up swiftly, we'll decide what actions our countries will take, what actions the G7 countries will take in case of a crisis occurring. So this will be finalized in October. So if there's a crisis that jeopardizes the supply of chips, which are so essential in Europe, and this is exactly what happened during the pandemic. So we have this experience. We know it can happen again, maybe for other reasons this time. So if there's a break in the supply chain, if there's a crisis, what will we do to ensure that we have our supply of chips? Do we have alternative supply chains? So we will be discussing this and making decisions over the next few months. In addition, the G7 businesses will be on board because they will have to give us an idea of what we will need to do if there is a chip supply emergency. We've also decided that we need resilient underwater networks and terrestrial and satellite networks. We've agreed on this, and in the document we reiterate how strategic this is, especially in the current geopolitical setting. I mean, you know this better than I. So submarine cable connectivity makes global communications more secure and efficient. Therefore, we are assessing alternative routes as well, through the Arctic, for example, and not only the Arctic region. Because in any case, we need cables to ensure our shared security. And the Arctic route at this point in time seems to be the most feasible one. And in this connection, in other words, with regard to the Arctic route, we approved a joint declaration which is attached to the Ministerial declaration. So it's on networks in particular, and on cable connectivity for digital, for secure and resilient digital networks. So in addition to the Ministerial declaration, there will be a joint declaration attached to this, which specifically deals with cable connectivity for secure and resilient digital networks. And we also speak about space satellites. You know that Italy is in a lead position here. We will be celebrating, I think, our 60th or 70th anniversary of our first launch in space. So we are a world power here. And we are doing this in order to help us understand what we can do in case of natural disasters, floods, earthquakes. So we can use space observation technology. We can work on this together with public and private sector organizations. And now I move on to my third area, which is digital technology for development. We have an innovative proposal, and we've all agreed on this. The United Nations agencies are also on board. And the proposal is the following. We want to create a hub on AI to the benefit of developing countries. So an AI hub to the benefit of developing countries, which, of course, is in line with the Mattei plan. Now, we have to determine how we are going to build this hub. We'll work together with the UN Sustainable Development Agency, with the G20, with the World Bank, with the African Development Bank, and so on. So this is our goal. This is our aim for the conclusive ministerial, before the concluding ministerial. So we want to create an AI hub to the benefit of developing countries. And we think this is absolutely essential, and we have to do it before the end of this year. So these are the three areas that we focused on, the aims that we've set for ourselves. You will find them in the declaration, and there will be information on how we think this might be done in the coming months. And with regard to the CHIPS working group, it won't just be a temporary thing, a provisional thing. It will be ongoing, an ongoing effort, because we absolutely have to do it together with the other G7 partners. And I'm sure you will continue to follow what is done throughout this entire year of Italian presidency of the G7. And of course, there will come an important moment when we have the summit of heads of government and heads of state and governments in Puglia. And then again, we'll have to report to them. And then again in October, when we have our hybrid meeting, some people will be there, others will be virtually present. I mean, it's up to the different delegations. We can't force them to come back a second time. I don't think that would be advisable. So it'll be a hybrid meeting, and we will conclude the work set out by the presidency under the mandate of the other 6 G7 countries.
Grazie, signor Ministro.
Thank you, Minister. Today's topic is AI. This is an important piece of digital technology overall, but there are other pieces as well. You spoke of networks, in fact, and you spoke of the cloud and other things, but no mention was made of the blockchain and cryptocurrencies. What is our government thinking of doing, or the G7? What are you considering for these other 2 pieces of digital technology? Well, I can answer the question on behalf of our government, of course. We are preparing a framework law which is linked to the budget law. In the budget law, we've indicated the so-called related bills. In other words, they are bills that are drafted in the following year, which is 2024, but which are funded. That's why they're related. They're funded with specific expenditure items of the budget law, which was approved in December of 2023 for this year now. So in that budget law, we pointed out there are 3 related laws, and we have to implement those in the coming months. The first is on enabling technologies, and we said that in addition to AI, I mean, when I say enabling technologies, we mean how to use them. We have blockchain, metaverse, and anything that is going to be of use for Italian businesses. So this related bill will be presented after the bill on AI, because, of course, there will also be a linkage with that, especially when it comes to enabling technologies. But it's already in the budget, as I said. So we have 320 million euros, and it's we have other 2 related bills that are linked to the industry of the future. So as I said, they are linked to enabling technologies, which everybody's going to need. And then we have space economy in the second related bill, so the use of space and how it can impact industry. And the third related bill, which is being drafted by multiple ministries, and that's on the blue economy. So enabling technologies, space, and the blue economy. These are the 3 related bills. And this is exactly where we're looking for the industry of the future. We call it a 2030 economy, or it could be 2050 economy as well. I mean, with regard to cryptocurrencies, well, that's not a subject of my. I don't have experience with this subject. I deal with other matters. There are other ministries, of course, that have greater competence when it comes to that. So when when there are other people who have more experience than I prefer not to respond. Thank you, Minister. With regard to the standing working group on semiconductors, well, one of the topics is an internal competition within the G7 countries in order to get the private investments in Europe. That's one thing. And the second is that in today's news, in today's financial news, could you say something on behalf of the government with regard to the private operation between Swiss and Vodafone, which of course is an important topic, and it is related to the network and the 5G investments envisaged in the NRRP. Well, on the first topic, this is related to the European Union policy, of course, and this is also a topic that was raised during the last Competitiveness Council a couple of weeks ago in Brussels, and there was a special session on competitiveness in Europe. And I highlighted what was said recently by Mario Draghi when he presented the ideas behind the report that he's been asked to produce. He presented it to the European Parliament, in fact, and there were two examples that are perfectly aligned with what Prime Minister Meloni said to the other European partners from day one. Mario Draghi said that for European competitiveness, especially with regard to the dual transition, the green and digital transitions, it is essential for Europe to do what the other competitors, what our other competitors are doing. In other words, they have to identify the public investments that are needed in the amount of at least 500 billion euros a year for the next 10 years. This is what is being done by the main competitors, i.e. China and the United States as well. And even more specifically, he said something that we said something at the beginning of the government. So we're happy to have heard this being said by Draghi to Europe. He said that we don't want to divide European countries because some can do this and others cannot. We don't want to divide the internal market, therefore. And in order to avoid that division, we have to create common European funds. It's the NRRP model, basically. And at the beginning of our government, when we were talking about investing, I mean, you're a journalist, and so am I, after all. In the beginning of the Parliament, we had a joint committee meeting, House and Senate, and I said the same thing, the very same thing. In other words, to tackle the Chinese challenge and the competitiveness coming from the U.S., because, after all, they're investing $3 trillion on their competitiveness, and Europe must do likewise. That way we won't divide Europe into two parts. Some countries can do it and others can't. So in order to do that, we need common European funds. And that's exactly what Mario Draghi said in his hearing at the European Parliament. And there was another very good example, because, I mean, he did criticize us when we said we had to protect the internal market. There was a statement he made about duties on Chinese automobiles. Our duties are 10%, whereas in the U.S. they're 27.5%. How can we possibly make it? And when candidate Trump said he would raise that to 67% if elected, then what would happen? And a few days later, Europe turned on a spotlight on the entry of Chinese cars into Europe to see whether there is any dumping going on. And finally, Europe is listening to us on this point. And action is being taken for the industrial policy. Of course, this is also labor policy for us. And this is, I mean, I won't go into the merits of this operation. I won't say anything about that.
Grazie, sono Anna Di Rocco di MF.
Anna Di Rocco, MF Newswires. A follow-up on this subject of Italian competitiveness in the automotive industry. I mean, you're talking about the fact that we want to save jobs and made in Italy as a concept. But today in the news, they're saying that Italy is looking for partners, even Chinese partners, in order to produce automobiles in Italy. Well, to pursue industrial policy here in our country, and this is what we think we need to do finally, and we've restored the G7 on industry because we have a vision, we have a strategy starting here in Italy, which will involve obviously Europe and then other international bodies and so the G7. Now, in order to do this, we have to start all over again. Where do we start? With steel. Because thanks to steel, we've had a competitive automobile industry in Italy, and thanks to steel, we have shipbuilding, nautical industry, the construction industry, and now the manufacturing industry, which is ranked second in Europe after Germany. So with this industrial policy, I say that we need to focus on steel works, and this is what we're doing in Terni, in Piombino, in Taranto, in Genoa, in Novi Ligure, and in the other areas where we have steel plants, because we have to fully implement this steel policy based on the current rules and within the framework of the green transition. We're not trying to belie it, but we're trying to make it more feasible, more doable. So we have to do this in production facilities and in environmental facilities as well. And now we're starting with the leading industry, which is the automobile industry, and that's why we've decided to start from there. So we've had a working group on the automotive industry with all the stakeholders, and then with Stellantis, we set up a working group in December. Stellantis had said they would produce 1 million cars again in Italy, all the way up to 1 million. And now this working group is meeting every day. There are 5 technical working groups, actually, with all the stakeholders and the businesses that work in the automotive industry. So Stellantis, the unions, and the government, all the stakeholders. And in June, hopefully, they will be presenting a document, and they will determine for each plant what investments will be needed, what models will be adopted, and so on. I think this is feasible. I think we can produce 1 million vehicles in Italy at some point, but that's not enough. That's not going to be enough to meet the demand of the internal market, because here in Italy we have the largest delta between production and the registration of new cars. This delta between production, 450,000 cars, and the registration, 1 million and some odd cars, the delta is 35%. So the difference between the delta between production and the registration of new cars. So with AMFIA, we agreed that in order to have a competitive automobile industry, which is a leading industry as far as we're concerned, and we export parts to other automobile companies. So to do this in our country, we will have to meet the demand of our market, which is 1.3 million cars. So something is missing there. And why is that something missing? Well, it's missing because Italy is the only automobile producing country to have only one company doing that. In other countries, there are 4 to 6, 7 different automobile companies, manufacturers. So France, Germany, Poland, Slovak, Republic, and so on, Spain, where there are 7. So we can't ask a country to do the same thing with only one automobile manufacturer that other countries do with 7. But in our strategic plan, we are envisaging another player. And for over a year now already, we've been working. We have a task force that has met with the main automobile manufacturers on the different continents so that we can have at least another manufacturer here in Italy. And, of course, I'm referring to Asian as well as Western manufacturers. And we also invested in Silicon Box. And it's not that this just happened. It happened because more than a year ago, a task force from my ministry, not the same as the automotive task force, this task force went to the different producer countries, South Korea, Taiwan, Japan, Singapore, and the U.S. They went there and produced and presented to our investment opportunities to multiple companies. And Silicon Box, a company in Singapore, decided to set up its new factory in Italy on chip manufacturing. So several billions I'm talking here, but this isn't the only investment that's being made in the chips industry. But it's the first important investment, and we will be able to announce more, hopefully, this year. So this is how you plan an industrial policy, and this is how you implement it. So we obviously have to do all of this on the basis of European rules. If there are new rules, if the rules are changed, I mean, we'll have to change as well, and I'm sure our country will be able to seize new opportunities. Why has there been in our budget law an increase in the fund for microelectronics? We added $1 billion to that because we know that the investments being made that could be made in our country are going to need a larger fund than the one that we had initially envisaged.
Sì, ci vediamo a margine di qualche altro.
So I'll see you in May. Thank you. Bye-bye.